He reached for my paralyzed father's wheelchair like he was moving a piece of lawn furniture, calm, careless, and completely convinced no one would stop him. But before his fingers made contact, I stepped out from the shadows and dropped him in 6 seconds flat, with nothing but my hands and the training he never saw coming. They thought they picked an easy target. Turns out, they picked the wrong daughter. It started with the sound of wind brushing through the magnolia trees that lined the quiet streets of Palmetto Glen, a sleepy little suburb tucked just outside Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of place where porch swings creaked in rhythm with time, where morning coffee was sacred, and where your neighbors might gossip but they still brought you soup when you were sick. At the heart of one of these oak-shaded streets sat a modest brick house with ivy curling up the corners and a rust-red mailbox that leaned slightly forward, as if bowing from the weight of years. The man who lived there, Louis Franklin, was 72 years old and had hands like iron and a voice like gravel warmed in honey. A retired blacksmith and a disabled Navy veteran, Louis hadn't walked unaided in almost 4 years, not since a stroke carved away part of his left side like a thief in the night. But he was still sharp, still proud, and still stubborn enough to sweep his own porch from a seated position, one arm bracing the broom handle while the other guided it back and forth across the boards. He called the house the Forge, not because of the heat, but because of what it meant. This was where life was shaped, where memories were hammered into permanence, where he and his late wife, Margaret, had built a quiet kind of legacy. After she passed, Louis never considered leaving. Said the trees were good company, and the quiet helped him think. He had Marla now, a kind-eyed home nurse who came by 5 days a week. She was the one who kept the place neat, made sure the hedges didn't grow wild, the gutters stayed clear, and the yard never hinted at neglect. Which is why, when the first folded note appeared in the mailbox, Louis just chuckled. "Grass too high," it said. "This isn't a pasture." No signature. No letterhead. Just that typed line, plain as a slap. Marla found the second one taped to the trash bin a few mornings later, cans left out past pickup. Second warning. She looked. Confused, Louis never missed trash day. She always rolled them in by noon. "Someone's playing games," she muttered, tossing it. But 3 days later, a bright yellow slip was taped to the storm door. Bolder now. Final notice, non-compliance with Clause A12. You have 10 days to vacate. Still no name. Still no phone number. Just those sterile, threatening words typed in bold. That's when Marla sat down across from Louis at the kitchen table, her fingers clutching a mug that had long gone cold. "There were 2 men here last week," she said quietly, "while you were asleep. Said they were with something called homeowners enforcement. Wanted to come inside, inspect the interior for violations." Louis raised an eyebrow. "You let him in?" "Heck no. I shut the door and told them to get lost." That night, she called Louis's daughter. She didn't tell him that part. She just excused herself, stepped out onto the porch, and made the call. Danielle Franklin answered on the second ring. 39. No nonsense. A cybersecurity contractor by trade, but with a past buried deep in special operations, places where cameras didn't go and names disappeared into shadows. She hadn't told her father the truth about her career. He thought she did tech stuff for the Navy. He didn't need to know the rest. But when Marla explained what was happening, the notes, the uniforms, the threats, Danielle was already packing. "I'll be there by morning," she said. By sunrise, her Dodge Durango was parked 3 houses down, blending in with the sleepy street. She greeted her father with a soft smile, a fresh bag of groceries, and a story about needing a break from work. Louis didn't ask questions. He just pointed her toward the guest room and said, "Welcome home, kid." The next day, Danielle got to work. Quietly. She installed 2 exterior cameras, one tucked into the azalea bush near the front walk, the other fixed beneath the awning above the porch swing. A third, smaller cam was mounted inside a hollowed-out wind chime. She checked the door locks, replaced the flimsy deadbolt with a smart lock, and programmed it with a code only she and Marla knew. She hid a body cam inside a hook behind the umbrella stand near the door. She didn't tell her dad any of it. At night, she watched footage and scanned digital records. The so-called HOA in the neighborhood? Completely voluntary. No legal authority to enforce evictions. No jurisdiction over private property. And definitely no division called homeowners enforcement. But the notices, they were polished. They were designed to look official. Someone was forging documentation. Someone was trying to scare her father out of his own home. And Danielle had seen enough long cons to know this wasn't random. It was strategic. Targeted. It started with small infractions, mild enough to brush off. Then came the escalation. Fake authority. Uniforms that mimicked legitimacy but were just off enough to make her gut stir. Fonts slightly too bold. Logos that almost matched state seals. The kind of tactics used in psychological operations, push someone just hard enough to make them feel isolated, like maybe they were in the wrong. And if you pick the right target, an aging veteran, living alone, disabled, it becomes easy to twist intimidation into compliance. But they picked the wrong target this time. Because Danielle wasn't some concerned daughter who'd panic and call a lawyer. She was trained to operate under pressure. To interrogate, analyze, predict. She didn't bluff. She calculated. And right now, she was calculating exactly how long it would take them to come back. That night, she sat beside her father on the porch as the sun dipped below the Carolina pines. He sipped sweet tea and worked on a crossword puzzle while cicadas hummed in the background. "You okay, kid?" he asked, not looking up. Danielle smiled faintly. "I am now." He nodded. That was all. Inside, the house was still. On the wall hung an old Navy photograph, Lewis in uniform, Margaret on his arm, both of them smiling like the world hadn't yet gotten heavy. Danielle glanced at it as she passed, pausing just a moment. She didn't have to say it out loud, but she thought it anyway. They came for the wrong man. And I'm here now. Across the street, someone's porch light flicked on. Somewhere farther down, a dog barked. The neighborhood was settling in. But Danielle wasn't. She was waiting. Watching. Because this wasn't just her father's home. It was a line in the sand. And she knew exactly what would happen when the wolves finally crossed it. The sun was already climbing by the time Danielle heard the engine. Smooth, low, deliberate. Not the lazy rumble of a neighbor's pickup or the rattle of a landscaper's trailer. This was something else, calculated, controlled. From her perch in the guest bedroom, she leaned slightly to the side, just enough to catch a glimpse through the sheer curtain. A black SUV. Tinted windows. No front plate. It eased in front of the red mailbox like it had every right in the world to be there. Then, in one fluid move, it reversed into the driveway of the forge. Danielle's fingers slid automatically across her phone screen, bringing up the exterior cam feed. The view from the azalea bush showed two men stepping out. Khakis. Matching black polos. Gold eagle insignias stitched across their chests. And those words, Community Code Enforcement. They looked official at first glance, but the font was too bold, the shirts too tight, the whole presentation trying too hard to look legitimate. One of them carried a clipboard, walking with the smug bounce of a man who thought paperwork made him powerful. The other rested his hand casually near his hip, where a mock badge was clipped to his belt, flat, plastic, probably purchased in a bundle online. Danielle's stomach tensed, but her breath stayed even. She moved like she was made of wires and glass, silent, precise. In the kitchen, Marla stood frozen, holding a glass of water halfway to her lips. Danielle gave her a sharp nod. No words. Marla understood and stepped back, fingers dialing 911 with practiced calm. Outside, Lewis was already on the porch, seated in his wheelchair with the morning crossword in his lap. He looked up as the men approached, a puzzled smile spreading across his face like habit. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked. The one with the clipboard cleared his throat. "Sir, we're here on behalf of the Homeowners Code Division." You've been found in violation of several local ordinances, non-regulation ramp, unauthorized. Signage, general disrepair. This property is now flagged for compliance removal under Clause 812. Lewis blinked. Compliance removal? What does that even mean? The second man stepped closer, posture tightening. It means you're being evicted, sir. We're here to assist in that process. Danielle was already moving. She zipped up her jacket, flicked the GoPro hidden in her collar to record, and slid a small ID folder into her back pocket, nothing classified, just a clean version of who she was willing to be today. She stepped out the side door and moved quietly around the back of the house, boots crunching softly on the pine needles. She came around the corner just as the second man reached toward her father's wheelchair. Maybe he was planning to grab the armrest. Maybe worse. He didn't get the chance. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" Danielle's voice was calm, even, but carried the weight of cold steel. Both men turned. Clipboard guy blinked first. "Ma'am, this is an official enforcement action. You'll need to stand aside." "You're going to want to walk that back," Danielle said, stepping onto the porch slowly, hands visible, stance firm. "Because impersonating government officials violates Title 18, Section 912 of the United States Code." The one closest to Lewis smirked. "We're with the HOA division, ma'am." "Fully authorized." "No," she said, pulling a folded sheet of paper from her jacket. "You're not. The HOA here is voluntary. I checked with the county registry this morning. There is no such enforcement division. There are no fines, no citations, and absolutely no authority to remove someone from their property." Clipboard guy shifted uncomfortably. "We have documents, forged documents," Danielle cut in. "And if either of you takes another step toward my father, I will interpret that as an immediate threat." The man by Lewis hesitated, eyes scanning Danielle's stance. She wasn't bluffing. He didn't know how she knew the exact spacing. Between his feet, the twitch in his right elbow, or the slight tremor of his left eye, tells that meant tension, a need to dominate. She saw all of it. And when his hand twitched again, she moved. In one smooth pivot, she stepped in, hooked his reaching wrist with hers, slammed her palm up into his elbow, and dropped him like a sandbag. His knees buckled, hit the wooden porch hard. He groaned, but before he could recover, Danielle twisted the wrist behind his back and secured it with a flex cuff from her pocket. 6 seconds. Tops. Clipboard guy took one full step back, hands raised halfway. "We're just doing our job," he stammered. "You're impersonating law enforcement," Danielle replied coldly. "That's not a job. That's a felony." She stepped toward him slowly, deliberately. "What's your name?" "Greg Thomas." "Real name?" Silence. Danielle's eyes narrowed. She reached out, gripped his forearm, and applied pressure, not enough to injure, just enough to let him know she could. "You scare old men for money, Greg? That your thing?" I don't know what you think this is. I think it's part of something bigger," she said. "I think someone's behind this, and unless you want to be the one holding the bag when the sheriff gets here, I suggest you stay real still and rethink your life choices." He sat down hard on the porch step, sweat blooming through his cheap shirt. Danielle turned to Marla, who was already on the line with dispatch. "Yes, they're down," Marla said. "2 males, 1 restrained, the other zip-tied. No weapons drawn. Just hands. Yes, you'll want to bring backup." Through the corner of her eye, Danielle saw the curtain twitch across the street. A neighbor watching. Good. Witnesses mattered. She activated the GoPro's stream-to-cloud function, tagging it to a private backup server. Redundancy was protection. And this wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was coordinated. Calculated. 10 minutes later, the familiar sweep of sirens echoed. Down the block. 3 cruisers rolled in, 1 marked sheriff's unit and 2 patrol cars. The lead officer stepped out, a tall, broad man in his 50s with the kind of face that had seen enough. His name tag read Brody. His eyes swept the porch and landed on Danielle. You did this? He asked. Yes, sir. With what? Patience, she said. And pressure. Brody looked at her for a long second. Name? Danielle Franklin. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Military? Former. He didn't ask more. Just gave a grunt of approval and waved his deputies forward. Danielle handed over her ID and the footage. The SUV's untagged. They're posing as HOA enforcement. I've got visual proof they initiated contact without cause, and they attempted to remove my father under false pretenses. The deputies moved in, checking the men, securing the vehicle. Within minutes, they'd confirmed the SUV was registered to a shell company. The badge? Plastic. The clipboard? Blank forms. Danielle crouched beside the one still zip-tied to the porch column. This isn't your first time, is it? She asked. Somebody sent you. The man looked away. But Danielle followed his gaze down the block, toward the cul-de-sac entrance. A sleek black sedan sat parked too far off to be coincidence. Engine running. Windows dark. She nodded toward Brody. We've got a possible lookout. That sedan. Brody keyed his mic unit 4, move on that vehicle, quietly. The response was immediate. 2 officers circled around the back of the block. The sedan peeled out within seconds, but not before they caught the plate. Danielle turned back to clipboard guy. His name wasn't Greg. That much was clear. And the sweat running down his temple told her everything else. He cracked. It was Donnelly, he whispered. Craig Donnelly. Said nobody ever calls the cops. Said it was easy money. Just pressure the old folks. Most of 'em cave. Danielle didn't respond. She just stood and looked at her father, who hadn't moved. During the entire incident, his hands still resting on the arms of his wheelchair, his jaw tight, his eyes glassy. You okay, Dad? She asked. He nodded slowly. That was fast. So was I, she said with a faint smile. Behind her, Sheriff Brody gave a low whistle as his team hauled the 2 men toward their squad cars. I'll need a full statement, he said. You'll have it. Danielle glanced once more down the block. The sun was higher now. The porch was quiet again. But the storm had passed. And she was still standing. Sheriff Brody didn't need a second look at the 2 restrained men to know something deeper was unfolding on that porch. As his deputies secured the suspects and began processing the scene, he gave Danielle a curt nod and motioned her over to his cruiser. Walk me through it, he said. Danielle did, with precision. Every detail, the fake uniforms, the forged eviction papers, the unauthorized attempt to remove her father from his home. She handed over the footage from her GoPro, cloud-synced and time-stamped, and laid out the names, or at least the aliases, the men gave. One of the deputies returned moments later, whispering to Brody before handing him a printout. The SUV, he confirmed, was registered to a shell company out of Beaufort County. A dead-end address. Danielle didn't flinch. They're laundering operations. That vehicle's been used before. Brody raised an eyebrow. You sure? I'd bet a paycheck on it. The sheriff glanced down the block where his officers were returning from questioning the mysterious black sedan's driver. The plate was already flagged, linked to a private security firm dissolved just last year under suspicious financial filings. It was all falling into place. Brody stared at the zip-tied clipboard man, now hunched on the porch like a wilted scarecrow. Looks like we've got ourselves a racket. Danielle nodded. An organized one. And I'm guessing this isn't their first visit to a vulnerable homeowner. Just then, one of the restrained men cracked. He started talking. First slow, then desperate. We were hired, he muttered. We don't pick the targets. We're told where to go. Told it's safe. That no one fights back. Who told you? Brody asked. Donnelly. Craig Donnelly. Danielle's blood turned cold. That name had shown up on the first fake notice they'd received, buried in the footer like a watermark, Office of Compliance, President C. Donnelly. Brody sighed. President of the HOA? Acting president, Danielle said. The original board. Voted him in last fall after 2 members stepped down. Voluntary HOA, right? Exactly. No legal enforcement power. But he's been running it like a private fiefdom. Over the next few hours, the full scale of the operation unraveled. Donnelly had set up an enforcement arm under the guise of a shell corporation, outsourcing eviction intimidation to unlicensed thugs who masqueraded as officials. Their tactic was simple: pick elderly, disabled, or widowed homeowners, cite them with forged violations, and pressure them into selling their properties at below-market rates. The goal? Flip the homes for profit under a redevelopment scheme masked as neighborhood beautification. Danielle sat in on the first round of questioning. She didn't speak much, just observed, leaning back in her chair, eyes flicking between the 2 men. One of them couldn't stop glancing at the camera lens perched above the interview table. You've got priors, Brody said flatly. 1 in Georgia for impersonating an officer. 1 pending in Florida for unlawful entry. The man, clipboard guy, sweated like a faucet. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. You tried to pull a disabled veteran from his own home, Brody growled. Don't you dare say this was harmless. The man slumped. We only did it 3 times before this. Always soft targets. They told us no one would get hurt. Danielle folded her arms. You were wrong. By evening, the story had spread, first among the neighbors, then on local social media, then picked up by a Charleston affiliate news station. A clip from Danielle's GoPro, showing the moment she took down the attacker, made the rounds online. The headline, Veteran's Daughter Takes Down Fake HOA Enforcers in South Carolina Scam. The reactions were swift and thunderous. Veterans groups shared the footage. Advocacy pages called for reform. A state senator demanded an audit of all active HOA boards. And Craig Donnelly? Arrested the next morning while trying to board a flight to Phoenix. Under a different name. Turns out he had been under quiet investigation already. This just gave law enforcement the match they needed to light the fire. But for Danielle, the win wasn't in the headlines. It wasn't in the interviews or the public praise. It was 3 days later, when the buzz had settled and the porch swing creaked again in rhythm with the wind. The pines rustled above, the heat had lost its midday bite, and the sky bled soft orange as the sun dipped behind the trees. Lewis sat beside her, a blanket draped over his lap, the crossword in one hand, a mug of tea in the other. He hadn't spoken much about what happened. Not directly. But as he watched the robin land on the porch rail, he exhaled slowly and said, People always told me to get my affairs in order. You know, just in case. Danielle tilted her head. And? They didn't know, he said with a soft grin. My daughter was the will. Danielle laughed, warm, surprised, touched in that way only fathers and daughters understood. He reached over, patted her hand once. You were always quiet. Thoughtful. Like your mom. But I guess I didn't realize you were dangerous too. Only when I need to be, she said. Across the street, Mrs. Pennington, an 84-year-old widow who had lived there since her husband returned from Vietnam, was kneeling in her garden, replanting rose bushes. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't rushing. Danielle watched her, heart heavy but proud. She got one of the same notes last month, she said quietly. Lewis nodded. They were circling. Danielle sipped her tea, the steam curling upward into the twilight air. Not anymore. No more fake fines. No more threats scribbled on anonymous paper. No more driveways filled with black SUVs trying to scare the weak. The forge stood strong. Not because of its brick or wood or beams, but because someone fought back. Not with lawsuits or shouting, but with evidence, training, and calm, unshakable resolve. The next day, Sheriff Brody called. He said the AG's office was launching a statewide probe into HOA fraud schemes. He wanted Danielle to come speak at a public safety forum. She said she'd think about it. For now, she was just glad her dad could sleep through the night again without fear of a knock at the door. As the stars blinked into the sky, Lewis leaned back and looked at his daughter. "You know," he said, "I always thought justice came in a uniform." Danielle smiled. "Sometimes," she said. "But sometimes it wears old boots and a GoPro." And in the soft Carolina night, with the porch light glowing behind them and the air finally still, justice, quiet, firm, and long overdue, settled in for good. What happened on that quiet porch in South Carolina wasn't just a takedown, it was a wake-up call. A reminder that justice doesn't always arrive in a patrol car or wear a shiny badge. Sometimes, it shows up in the form of a daughter who refuses to let her father be pushed out of the home he built with his own hands. Sometimes, justice is quiet, prepared, and ready to act when no one else will. The lesson here is simple but powerful: don't be intimidated by false authority. Whether it's someone in a fake uniform or a system that's been abused by those in power, remember that truth, courage, and preparation are stronger than fear. Scammers and bullies thrive when they believe no one will push back. But the moment you stand your ground, with facts, evidence, and confidence, you shift the power back where it belongs. To anyone who's watching this and thinking, "That could have been my dad. That could have been my home," know this: you are not powerless. Learn your rights. Know your local laws. Don't ignore red flags, and don't assume every person who shows up with a logo and a clipboard has the law on their side. Verification is protection. Documentation is defense. And courage is your shield. And to the daughters, sons, neighbors, and friends out there who are quietly protecting the ones they love, you matter more than you think. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to stay silent to expose an entire system of corruption. At U.S. Justice Story, we share these stories not just to entertain, but to empower. To remind people that justice isn't just found in the courtroom, it's lived every day, in small moments, on ordinary porches, by extraordinary people. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching, listening, and standing with us. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it today. Until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and remember, justice begins at home.